Hello everyone, my name is Lowko and welcome back to another StarCraft video. Now what I got for you today is a very high level match of professional Terran versus Protoss, where apparently our Terran player spawning here in the bottom right hand corner of the map is already sending out an SCV to the other side very early on. He's a legend from StarCraft 1 and he goes by the name of Fantasy. And actually, look at that, he's even gonna be sending out a second SCV right now as well. His opponent, however, definitely not a weak player whatsoever. He's spawning here with the pink Protoss probes. We're currently looking inside of the main base of Zest. And Zest, of course, one of the most successful Protoss players of all time. I consider him to be one of the very greatest. And while Fantasy, of course, is very good, he's especially very successful over in StarCraft 1. After recently wrapping up his mandatory military service in South Korea, Fantasy decided to get back into StarCraft 2, and he's been improving very rapidly. Now, excellent scout there by Zest. He will find out that indeed two barracks are being constructed right here in the center of the map. He's gonna start zapping away right here, tasing away at those SCVs. The first one will go down. Fantasy needs to finish up at the very least one of them. Obviously, this being scouted though hurts quite a bit. A second probe now also coming off the mineral line. And actually, Zest, he is gonna be able to get the kill there. But the barracks does finish. And this is the thing, right? This is what Terran players have been doing for a while. Cheeky there. But this is one of the things the Terran players have been doing for a while. Obviously, building the barracks out on a map doesn't really hurt in very many ways, as you still unlock the fantasy, or rather the factory requirement right now. Not the fantasy requirement. Fantasy can just play whatever he likes. No, but you can still make the factory right here to complete the wall off. Actually, yeah, this looks like a Lowko wall right there to me. For those of you that watch the live stream, you've seen me make wall offs every once in a while. Yeah, that's a Lowko wall to a T. Now, the two probes desperately trying to go on a little bit of a hunt. Ooh, excellent control micro there, actually, by Fantasy. Zest does decide to mineral walk through those SCVs, and he does get the kill there on the third one of those workers. Now, Fantasy apparently also has a Marine sleeping on the job. I mean, to be fair, I did do a bit of a walk through the center of it as well. A Reaper now also came out, though. That bunker was constructed while this was all going on, and Fantasy is going to be able to start harassing his opponent here. Zest did try to construct that robotics facility here, but eventually, though, I think this should be shooed away now with those two gateways producing an adept as well. So a little bit of a chaotic opener here. The first two adepts, though, already made their way across as well. They're going to be able to start nibbling away at whatever they can find. And with the factory actually not down just yet, this can get a little bit awkward. Keep in mind, with the new patch, you cannot actually construct, like, for example, a cyclone here to permanently shoo away those adepts. You're going to have to wait until, I guess, a Widow Mine? Yeah, there we go. A Widow Mine does finish. The Reaper, though, in the meantime, on the other side of the map, did manage to get to the safety right here of that bunker. Eventually, though, I've got a feeling this will be shut down as well. Zest, though, rather than putting down a Nexus, now decides to put down two additional gateways, as well as that robotics facility. Widow Mine will be coming up in just a little bit, and Fantasy did decide to return his barracks as well. But this is kind of what happens in Terran versus Protoss lately. It's a very explosive start, but I can't help but notice that this should be pretty heavily in favor right now of our Protoss player. He's looking really solid. Obviously, while he may have been intending to go for that expansion here earlier on, he hasn't really lost all too much. And that's actually 8 worker kills there in total by Zest. Really well done. Now, of course, Fantasy is still a Terran player, okay? You don't need to put your structures out inside of your main base. I mean, remember the days when Terran players used to build all of their structures inside of their bases? Nowadays, that's relatively uncommon. At least at this level of play, there's pretty much zero reason. As long as you complete the wall over here, you should be in a relatively good spot. Siege Tank, though, will be coming up here in just a little bit. Stalkers, as well as that probe, as well as the 3 adepts, are now currently making their way across. But that does mean that the main base is going to be completely left alone. Neither player really going for an expansion just yet, and I think this is actually going to be a rather committed push here from Zest. That Siege Tank, though, in a really strong position. The Widow meme right there in the back of it as well. You see that? Great pickup though by Zest, preventing it from getting any lethal shots. And while the bunker eventually was cancelled, then another one of those SCVs was just killed. I think they should be shut down relatively easily. Still though, that's 3 of those adepts even inside of that prism. They're gonna be enough to shut down one SCV at a time with proper target firing, and with this amount of anti-air, it's pretty difficult for Fantasy to force that prism away. Now with the Cyclone available as well though, he's gonna try and find the lock-on. There we go. And that's actually a lot of range, right? You need to be in a 5 range for the lock-on, but at the same time, you can still continue fighting and shooting away at whatever it is you're locked onto for a much longer range. Fantasy though, while he did end up killing the prism, he did not quite get that many kills right here on the Liberator, and it's now stuck in that awkward spot in the top left-hand corner, I guess, digging for some gold. Is that what it's trying to do? Ooh, nice little range there. That's gonna be a little bit annoying. There we go. Should get at least another, maybe, yeah, okay. Just one kill. Just one kill for now. Alrighty. Now these Stalkers, right, they know that that Liberator came from somewhere. If it came from inside of the main, he probably would have sieged it up on the ramp instead. So they know that there's likely gonna be a Starport somewhere. Now we at this point do realize that there's gonna be that Starport producing a Banshee as well as the cloaking upgrade. So Fantasy is gonna try and pile on the pressure. Is he gonna get a second one as well? Now this might be a really lucky scout here. If he could snipe this, oh my god, that would be so big. That would be massive. At the same time, one of the Liberators does die as well. Fantasy does not have Cloak yet, so I think he's gonna be able to just eventually force this away, but yeah, Cloak gets cancelled there as well. Zest is gonna start shooting away at the Starport, and while the Banshee will try and see if it can deal some damage, it's likely not gonna do all that much here whatsoever. Alrighty. So after a very explosive, very technical, and very difficult early game, it looks like both players are finally gonna transition towards an expansion. The command center is finishing right here. The Nexus is already done. The Banshee's trying to get a kill right there on one of those sentries. Beautiful move, actually. Very, very important to try and lower that amount. The Stalkers, though, know that now the Terran army is trying to make a move across the map, and they decide to go for the counter instead, slowing down this push. I guess Zest does sacrifice just a single unit for this for now. Not too bad. That at the very least gonna buy him a lot of time to continue getting those warp-in cycles as well. Ooh, man. Cheeky plays there. I love it. So cool to see the Cyclone become this microable unit that really gets so much value. Anyways, while this is going on, right, look, Zest is gonna be able to get another one of those warp-ins off, and that's what he needs. I think if Fantasy would have pushed there was a good chance that he could deal a critical amounts of damage. In particular, after that one sentry snipe, but at this point, Zest is feeling confident to make a move out of himself instead. How many gateways is that right now? Only 4 for the time being. Oh man, both players posturing so hard. Man, the Terran versus Protoss matchup is getting really technical and very difficult to play. I mean, just a small change to the Cyclone, right? And the fact that Terrans now love proxying all of their structures, it really makes the game a lot more difficult to play. I mean, you can already see that this game is very different than what we had over like the last month or two in SC2. Both players trying to outsmart and outclever each other, and there's a lot of little fights happening throughout the entirety of the game. I love this. It's hard to say who's currently ahead. Early on, I would really have said that Zest was the one who had a clear advantage there, but the work count has sort of been evened up. Both players got their expansions out, and wow, Zest executing some cute micro there, does manage to get himself that single Cyclone kill there as well. Now, of course, a War Prism with 2 Immortals in it. The potential is there, but the potential in my hands would be not as amazing. Let's be real, okay? I've tried doing these kind of strategies with a War Prism as well. It is very good if you get the damage in, but it's also very difficult to control. If you lose this Prism, that's pretty much game over. If that were to happen, Zest would literally just have to hold on to his bases and try and just not die, okay? Because Fantasy would just be able to unsiege and start pushing. However, when you manage to get this damage in, right? The potential is enormous. And while, oh my god, Zest just barely gets on out of there, he does get out, and he does force Fantasy to stay home, and he does get 3 of those SCV kills as well. In the meantime, Templar Archives is now the transition of choice. That does mean we're going to be seeing those stormy boys coming up. There we go. The weather forecast says it's going to be stormy weather soon. Third Nexus is now also coming up. And we see the charge upgrade about halfway done right now for Zest. He's finally also going to be able to start up one of those forges here. Fantasy, though, feeling pretty confident. He's going to start making a move out across the map. Now, please keep in mind, Terran does not have a third command center yet. So it is really critical that Terran does not, start falling behind in the economy game. I love this positioning. Right? Yeah, there we go. Putting those siege tanks right behind the rocks, this creates an extremely powerful position for the Terran player. I mean, how are you ever going to push into that? I don't think you should, honestly, if you're Zest in this case. The Widow Mines there actually also set up in a really good position. The one hallucinated Phoenix does show exactly what's going on, but apparently, even though Zest did decide to cancel the command center, or rather the Nexus, he does push forward here. Great anti-armor missile, really lowering the armor of a lot of those units, but while a few of the siege tanks were picked off, this is still a fight that I think went heavily in favor there of Fantasy. I'm quite surprised that Zest even decided to commit to that push. Once again, though, the Prism with that control of Zest, whew, it is getting the damage in. I kind of want to know how many kills these Immortals have. That really has been a very cost-efficient fight, though, all things considered here for Terran. I mean, those tanks in the back were just shelling away, right, at those Protoss units for practically free. I'm kind of surprised that Zest decided to commit there, even though obviously he already was forced to cancel the Nexus. But regardless, Fantasy did decide to load up all of his units right now into those dropships as well. And we see the Prism, in the meantime, inside of the Terran's main base. So this is just about to get really awkward, I think. Both players trying to do a little bit of drop play. Still a lot of army was left behind as well. The High Templar showing that they can throw Kamehamehas here at the same time. The double Immortal, though. Like, there's still no Viking out, right? Which means that this is going to continue on for a little while longer. At the same time, big unload there inside of the main base of Zest. Fantasy is going to try and pile on the pressure. Does get one of those robotics facilities as well. Big strategic recall, though, is going to force a lot of those units from the third base inside of the main here as well. Great storms, great feedbacks, and Fantasy is going to be forced to pick up, but also lose quite a few units there in the process. Man, this game is the definition of an eye for an eye so far, right? There's been a lot of damage here across the board, but neither player really dealing critical amounts of damage just yet. Fantasy, though, decides to regroup all of his units with his main army here as well. And I think we're just about to see a very similar push once again. Now, how many siege tanks are there at this point? There's only a single tank. Only a single siege tank. That's not a lot. Third command center finally being constructed as well. Zest did finally finish up his third Nexus too, but here we go. That is still a lot of Terran. Even though there's only a single tank, it's still gonna hurt quite a bit. That golden Archon, though, of course, with that anti-armor missile, it's gonna take quite a bit more damage. But the zoning here, those storms, man, absolutely beautiful. Those storms are really weakening and softening up a lot of that army. Is there going to be enough right now, though, for the Protoss player to continue pushing forward? The Zealot warp in there. Very, very nicely done. The Raven trying to see whatever damage it can deal, but I think eventually Fantasy is going to be forced to get on out of there, and Zest just barely manages to stay alive. Man, this has been a crazy match. Zest decides to send the Warp Prism out right now as well, do a strategic warp in right where the Terran units were retreating from. Still, these Widow Mines, though, in the back can deal a tremendous amount of damage. Zest is going to try and see if he can find a better angle to fight at. I don't know if this is the one, though. I do not know if that is the angle you want to fight in. Great pickup once again there by Zest. Keep in mind, there is, of course, that Viking out right now as well. Not a lot of anti-air here for our Protoss player, but the Viking is not quite getting the angle that it's looking for just yet. Zest, once again, decided to load up a couple of those units inside of the Warp Prism, and he's also positioning his army in what looks to be an engagement towards the third base. Prism now unloading the units inside of the natural of the Terran, and at the same time, posturing forward there. Great storm hitting pretty much all of those units. Zest is dealing some damage over here, but at the same time, it looked as if the Protoss wanted to make a move towards the third here as well, actually finishing up a couple of those Widow Mines. So hectic, right? This is the kind of game where I'm looking at it, and even though it may not necessarily be very hard, every single engagement on its own, everything together and all of the things that are happening at once make this such a difficult and complicated situation to be in. Very, very well played. This is the kind of game where I'm looking at it and I realize that I'm probably never going to be able to play, you know, either the Terran or Terran units or the Protoss units this well. it's very difficult to, for example, like commit this amount of units to the attack. And actually, this could get a little awkward as well. The Prism is still here. Might go for a bit of a warp in towards the natural, but the Protoss army is now also moving forward. Zest is scouting ahead, but now he does realize, wait a second. The Terran army is trying to make a move out for it, and immediately Zest decides to start pushing forward here with his main force. The Warp Prism reinforcing as many units as possible as well. It looks like we are up for a bit of a base race as soon as Fantasy realizes this, he stims forward, he decides to move some of his units towards the natural of his opponent, and he starts dealing the damage that he can. Big strategic recall though, once again. Zest trying to return the majority of his army, leaving a lot of those zealots on the other side of the map, and they're gonna continue slicing away at all of those reinforcing Terran units. Fantasy, though, smartly enough, does not push up the ramp. If he would have pushed up that ramp, that would have been lethal, of course. You don't want to do that at this point in the game. Fantasy, though, still eating a massive storm. Zest decides to pull the boys from the natural as well. They are trying to get revenge for the Nexus that they just lost. And while this is all going on, right, Zest still has got all those units inside of the main of Fantasy. Those Zealots just simply picking up all of the Terran units as soon as they spawned. And that means, even though Fantasy looked really strong there for a while, Zest is the one who just barely manages to obtain the victory. What an excellent game. Really, really cool to see the Terran versus Protoss meta develop, right? It's really exciting to see where it's gonna settle. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed watching this game. If you did, make sure you hit that like button down below. And if you want to see more, make sure you hit that subscribe button, as well as the little bell icon so you get notifications as soon as future videos go live. A special thank you to all of the Patreon supporters, making this channel possible, of course. I really do appreciate it. But for now, I want to thank you for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile, alright? And I will see you once again in the next one.